Illegal now, but normal in 1950s. Many things that our grandparents and parents once considered commonplace in their daily lives back in the 1950s would make us raise an eyebrow in surprise, or even be shocked today. Especially for those who lived or grew up in the 1950s, these memories can be very vivid. Perhaps you experienced some of the things on this list, or saw others doing them. And perhaps you'll ask yourself, wait, really? I thought that was perfectly normal back then. Let's take a trip down memory lane together and see what surprises you the most. Sex-Segregated Job Ads. Remember those old newspapers? If you went back to the 1950s and flipped to the Help Wanted section, you'd see a scene very different from today. Job listings were divided into two separate columns, one for men wanted and one for women wanted. This wasn't just for convenience. It deeply reflected the ingrained gender stereotypes of the time. Looking at the men wanted column, you'd find jobs considered important and requiring qualities society then assigned to men. These included positions like business managers, engineers, and technicians. These jobs often demanded strength or intellect, according to old notions, requiring extensive travel or heavy lifting. More importantly, they typically came with much higher salaries, clear paths for advancement, and were seen as the roles for the family and societal pillars. And what about the women wanted column? It was filled with traditional service-oriented jobs. You'd see teachers, usually in lower grades, office workers like secretaries and typists, or nurses in supporting roles. There were even jobs related to homemaking, like department store clerks or domestic helpers. These ads often emphasized dexterity and meticulousness, or the ability to work under direction, not leadership or decision-making skills. Try to imagine a young woman in the 1950s who dreamed of becoming an engineer or a manager. She would face immense difficulties. She wouldn't find any job listings for those positions in the Women Wanted column. And if she tried applying for jobs in the Men Wanted column, she'd likely be rejected right from the interview stage. This clear division created an invisible yet incredibly strong wall, severely limiting the career paths of millions of women. Why was such obvious inequality widely accepted? Simply put, because it was the common reality of that era. It didn't just reflect, but also reinforce the traditional gender roles society had defaulted to. Men were expected to be the primary breadwinners, the pillars. Women were primarily focused on family, childcare, and doing jobs considered lighter or supportive. Most people at the time believed this was how things should be. Companies and employers simply followed the existing social norms without realizing they were contributing to structural inequality. Today, blatantly discriminatory job advertising like that is forbidden and considered illegal. We've recognized that classifying and restricting opportunities based on gender created a massive structural barrier for women. This not only prevented them from accessing high-paying careers or leadership positions, but also limited the overall development of society. A giant legal turning point occurred in 1964 with the introduction of the Civil Rights Act in the United States. This landmark legislation officially prohibited discrimination in employment based on many factors, including sex. This legally ended the practice of dividing job ads by gender, opening up significantly broader opportunities for women in all areas of life. Stocking Ipecac syrup at home. Going back to the 1950s and even 60s, here was a piece of advice many parents received from their esteemed pediatricians. Make sure you always had a bottle of Ipecac syrup in the family medicine cabinet. Ipecac syrup is a strong emetic, meaning it makes you vomit. The idea behind this advice was simple. If your child accidentally swallowed something toxic, an adult's pill, cleaning chemicals, or anything dangerous left within reach but grabbed out of curiosity, you'd just give them a dose of Ipecac. The hope was that the poison would be expelled through vomiting before the body could absorb it. In an era when knowledge about poison control was limited and specialized centers weren't common, Having this quick fix readily available at home gave parents a sense of safety and control, albeit fragile, in terrifying emergencies. It was considered a necessary preventive measure, like having bandages or antiseptic. This practice was considered normal because it was recommended by medical professionals themselves at the time. Doctors believed that inducing vomiting as quickly as possible was the most effective way to remove poisons from the body. Based on the medical knowledge and experience of the 1950s, this was truly a measure considered standard and reliable. In-depth research on pharmacology and toxicology hadn't developed as much as it has today. However, time and science have changed how we view this issue. Later research showed that inducing vomiting wasn't always as effective as people once thought. In many cases, a significant portion of the poison could still be absorbed before the Ipecac syrup took effect. More importantly, inducing vomiting could sometimes do more harm than good. For example, if a child swallowed corrosive chemicals, like acid or bleach, vomiting would cause that chemical to pass through the esophagus a second time, causing more severe damage. Inducing vomiting could also lead to the poison being inhaled into the lungs, which could be life-threatening. Today, modern poison control centers absolutely do not recommend using Ipecac. Instead, the general advice is, immediately call the poison control center or take the child to the nearest medical facility. Experts will guide you on the most appropriate treatment for the specific type of poison, which might involve using activated charcoal to absorb toxins or other treatment methods that are much safer and more effective than trying to induce vomiting at home. Exaggerated, misleading advertisements. Step into the world of 1950s advertising, and you'll find a market operating with minimal oversight. This was a time when the line between truth and flowery advertising claims was very blurry or even non-existent. Companies could make bold, exaggerated statements about their products with little fear of being verified or penalized. You might remember images that are shocking today. Cigarette ads featuring doctors in white coats, endorsing a certain brand of cigarettes as good for the throat or less irritating. Unbelievable, right? Smoking was linked to health and medical authorities were promoting it. It wasn't just cigarettes. The market was flooded with other products promising dreamlike results. There were diet products guaranteeing effortless weight loss just by using their product. Soft drinks were advertised as being good for digestion or even helping with weight loss. Miracle pills claimed to cure all sorts of ailments. The marketing style was very aggressive, targeting a wide audience, including women with beauty, diet, and home products, and even children with cereals, toys, soft drinks. Ad copy often used absolute terms like best, only, completely cures, without needing actual scientific evidence. Why was there such freedom in advertising? The main reason was that regulatory agencies like the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, or the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, had very limited authority at the time. They didn't have enough laws, resources, or power to tightly control every advertising claim. Additionally, community awareness about health and skepticism towards advertising were not as high as today. Consumers tended to believe advertisements, especially when presented professionally or with, even fake, evidence from seemingly trustworthy figures. Today, the situation has changed completely. Community health awareness has significantly increased, especially after the harmful effects of smoking and other toxic substances were exposed. Consumers are more cautious of miracle advertising claims. This has led to the introduction and enforcement of much stricter regulations. Truth in advertising laws compel companies to prove the validity of product claims, particularly those regarding health or effectiveness. Misleading or deceptive advertising campaigns can face hefty fines. Furthermore, warning labels on products, like on cigarettes, food, chemicals, have become mandatory, providing important information and warning consumers about risks. Is there anything from the 1950s you remember that was once very normal but has now disappeared or is forbidden that I haven't mentioned. Widespread use of asbestos. In the 1950s, asbestos was the star of the building materials industry. It was hailed as a versatile, modern, and almost magical material. It was lightweight, durable, extremely heat-resistant, fireproof, good at sound insulation, and affordable. Sounds perfect, doesn't it? Because of these superior properties, asbestos was widely used in construction and manufacturing. It was present everywhere you could imagine, in insulation materials for walls, roofs, and pipes, in floor tiles, roofing materials, ceiling panels, in cement products, paints, and plaster, and even in old household appliances like hairdryers or irons. Construction workers had direct contact with asbestos daily when cutting, installing, or removing materials. Why did people use something so dangerous without hesitation? The reason is that the health risks associated with asbestos exposure were largely unknown or deliberately concealed by related industries at the time. Scientists might have had initial suspicions about the link between asbestos and lung diseases in miners, but this information was not widely publicized or was hidden or downplayed by the industries involved. Consumers and even many workers were unaware that the tiny asbestos fibers, when released from materials and floating in the air, could be inhaled into the lungs and stay there permanently, causing terrible consequences later. It took many decades later, when serious diseases began appearing at higher rates in people who had worked or lived in environments with asbestos, for the link to be clearly proven. Prolonged exposure to asbestos was later directly linked to extremely serious health problems, including mesothelioma, a rare and malignant cancer affecting the lining of the lungs or abdomen, lung cancer, asbestosis, a chronic disease causing breathing difficulties, and other lung diseases. Sadly, it took many years for regulations regarding asbestos use to be enacted and enforced. Although the use of asbestos in new materials is banned or very strictly limited in many countries today, the problem isn't over. Many old buildings constructed in the 1950s to 1970s still contain asbestos in insulation, flooring, ceilings, etc. Asbestos removal requires specialized handling by trained teams to ensure the fibers are not released into the environment and endanger others. Littering. You might find it hard to believe, but littering was once a fairly common and widely accepted social behavior in the 1950s. This doesn't mean everyone did it, but the general attitude towards public cleanliness was very different from today. Public trash cans were few or even non-existent in many places. The focus on systematic waste disposal or individual environmental responsibility was almost non-existent in community consciousness. Therefore, it was common for people to throw candy wrappers, empty bottles, snack packaging, or cigarette butts right on the street, in parks, or toss them out of car windows while driving on the highway. Think back to the image of picnics or public areas after a large gathering. The scene of scattered trash might make us shake our heads in dismay today. There were many reasons why this was normal. On one hand, it was a period of strong consumer culture development, leading to a significant increase in single-use packaged products. Unlike earlier times when packaging was reused or made from biodegradable materials, the 1950s saw a boom in plastic and other synthetic materials. On the other hand, there was a serious lack of awareness about the environmental impact of waste. Concepts like environmental pollution, the harm of plastic waste to ecosystems, or the importance of recycling were very vague or completely foreign to the vast majority of people. Throwing something away was seen simply as making it disappear from sight without considering the long-term consequences. Fortunately, this attitude has changed significantly. Thanks to strong environmental campaigns, like the famous Keep America Beautiful campaign featuring the crying Indian, public attitudes gradually shifted. People began to become more aware of the importance of protecting our shared living environment. Alongside this, laws and social norms today discourage littering behavior. Many cities and states have enacted laws prohibiting public littering and imposing significant fines on violators. Environmental education programs in schools and communities also helped shape the consciousness of new generations. Waste collection and recycling systems have been invested in and developed more widely. Recalling the image of streets and parks from back then and comparing them to the cleaner, hopefully present day, we can clearly feel the change in collective consciousness. From neglecting the environment, we have gradually learned to appreciate and be more responsible for our shared living space. Lobotomies. This might send shivers down many people's spines, but in the 1950s, lobotomy was considered a legitimate and sometimes widely practiced treatment for many mental health conditions. It was seen as a solution for illnesses ranging from severe depression and schizophrenia to unmanageable behavioral problems. Famous doctors like Walter Freeman widely promoted this procedure, performing it thousands of times, sometimes in public demonstrations. The procedure typically involved severing nerve connections in the frontal lobe of the brain, with the hope of reducing symptoms like anxiety, agitation, or delusions. Often, patients undergoing this procedure had little informed consent. In many cases, the decision was made by family members or guardians, sometimes not in the patient's best interest, but to control their abnormal behavior, making them more compliant and easier to manage in the context of overcrowded mental institutions. Lobotomy's acceptance was due to the very limited state of mental health care at the time. Other treatments like psychotherapy or tranquilizers were in their early stages or not widely available. Faced with severe mental illnesses and under-resourced mental hospitals, lobotomy was seen as a glimmer of hope, a last resort to help patients, or at least their caregivers, cope with their condition. As mentioned, the procedure was often performed without full consent, and sometimes just to control behavior rather than cure the illness. Societal perception of mental illness was also very different. Patients were often stigmatized and confined, and making them less troublesome was sometimes prioritized over actual rehabilitation. Today, lobotomy is viewed as a dark and painful chapter in the history of psychiatry. We clearly recognize that this procedure often caused severe, irreversible side effects. Patients after lobotomy could experience severe cognitive decline, abrupt and permanent personality changes, loss of emotional expression, or become completely passive. With the tremendous advancements in psychiatry, the introduction of effective medications, and modern therapeutic methods, lobotomy is no longer an acceptable form of treatment. It is strongly condemned for its destructiveness, lack of true effectiveness in restoring mental health, and often severe violation of patient rights. Child labor. Although child labor laws began to be enacted from the early 20th century, in reality, many children in the U.S. still participated in labor in the 1950s. This situation was particularly common in rural areas or in family businesses. Common jobs included delivering newspapers early in the morning or late afternoon, working on farms, harvesting crops, tending livestock, or doing odd jobs and chores in small family or community stores or factories, especially during summer vacation. While the sight of children working in large industrial factories like in the late 19th century was gone, it wasn't uncommon for children to spend a large portion of their time outside school hours earning money or helping their families. Children's participation in labor was often seen as a way to teach them responsibility, diligence, and the value of money. It was also a way for children to contribute additional income to the family, especially in disadvantaged families or in less developed economic areas. The line between helping the family in an age-appropriate way and child exploitation was not always clear in the social consciousness of the time. Many adults believed that working early would help children mature faster. Today, the concept of childhood and child development has changed significantly. There is much stricter enforcement of child labor laws. Regulations regarding minimum age, maximum working hours, and permitted types of jobs for minors are more strictly adhered to in most formal industries. There is much greater emphasis on education. Society values children being prioritized to attend school, learn, and play for comprehensive development, rather than having to bear financial responsibilities too early. Although violations or underground forms of child labor still exist, in terms of social and legal norms, child labor in formal industries has significantly decreased. Remembering the odd jobs you or your peers might have done in childhood, delivering papers, mowing lawns, grocery delivery, and reflecting on the difference in the perception of childhood and work today, it shows a shift in societal values, prioritizing children's right to learn, play, and develop. Cosmetics containing radiation. In an era when understanding of radiation was limited and beauty and health were valued, some manufacturers came up with strange ideas. They put radioactive ingredients like radium into cosmetic and health products. Hard to believe, isn't it? There were creams, powders, toothpaste, and even dietary supplements advertised as containing radium or other radioactive elements. They were promoted as scientifically advanced, revolutionary, and believed to be capable of rejuvenating the skin, removing wrinkles, boosting vitality, improving blood circulation, or even curing diseases. These products were often sold at high prices, targeting wealthy consumers eager for youth and health. The use of radioactive elements was seen as proof of the product's modernity and effectiveness. Why did people use such dangerous things? Simply because the health risks from radiation were very poorly understood or deliberately ignored by profit-driven manufacturers. Although cases of radiation poisoning had been recorded, like the female workers painting clock dials with radium paint who suffered severe poisoning, knowledge about the effects of low-dose or chronic radiation exposure was not widely disseminated. Belief in science and a lack of understanding about radiation made consumers easily trust false advertising claims. Today, we know very well that exposure to radioactive substances, even in small but prolonged doses, can cause extremely serious medical problems. The use of products containing radioactive substances led to radiation poisoning, cell damage, and increased risk of various cancers. As scientific knowledge about the harmful effects of radiation improved and became more widespread, these products containing radioactive substances were quickly removed from the market. Strict regulations were put in place to prevent the use of dangerous substances like radium in consumer products, especially cosmetics and dietary supplements. Agencies like the FDA today play an important role in controlling the ingredients of these products. Hitchhiking. In the 1950s, hitchhiking wasn't just a way to travel, it was a part of American road culture. It was considered a common and widely accepted means of transportation. You could often see people standing by the road, thumb out, hoping to catch a ride. Those hitchhiking were diverse, from young people on adventurous journeys, military personnel on leave, to simply those who didn't own a car in an era when cars weren't truly common for every family. It was seen as economical, completely free, and sometimes necessary, especially in rural areas or small towns where public transportation was limited or non-existent. Trust in strangers in society at that time seemed higher. Fewer people viewed giving or asking for rides as dangerous. It was a generous act, helping each other out on the road. Stories of adventurous hitchhiking trips and interesting encounters on the road became part of popular culture. This practice became normal and widespread, mainly due to the economic conditions and transportation infrastructure of the time. Not everyone could afford a car. The public transportation network wasn't as developed as it is today. Gasoline was cheaper, and importantly, as mentioned, violent crime rates on the road were lower, making people feel safer interacting with strangers on the road. Today, hitchhiking has significantly declined, and in many places is illegal. The main reason is increased concern for personal safety and the rise in criminal cases related to hitchhikers or drivers giving rides. Stories of abductions, robberies, or assaults have shaken trust in strangers on the road. Society today is much more cautious. Parents don't encourage their children to hitchhike. Drivers are also hesitant to give rides to strangers for fear of risk to themselves. The development of ride-sharing apps and public transportation also makes hitchhiking no longer the necessary or most economical option. Of all the things we've discussed, which one surprises you the most? Share your memories, thoughts, or anything you want to say in the comments below. Easy commitment to mental institutions. In the 1950s, the mental health care system was very rudimentary and differed profoundly from today. There was a sad reality that a family member could commit another relative to a mental institution or insane asylum relatively easily and often without strict legal oversight. In many cases, a statement from just one or two family members was enough for someone to be committed to a mental facility. This process often lacked independent medical evaluations, the right of the person being committed to be heard, and legal procedures protecting their rights. This was sometimes abused to control or remove individuals whose behavior was deemed different from social norms. In particular, women could be institutionalized for vague reasons like being too emotional, disobedient, having modern thoughts, or simply being troublesome to the family. The elderly or disabled could also be sent to these facilities without actually having a mental illness requiring treatment. This became common because facilities and laws regarding mental health were very limited. There were few psychiatrists and therapists. Effective treatment methods were not widely available. Besides that, the social perception of mental illness was very negative. Patients were often considered crazy, dangerous, or incurable. Committing them to a mental institution was seen as the only way to protect society or simply solve the problem for the family. The consequences of the old system were severe. Mental facilities were often overcrowded, living conditions were poor, and patients had very few rights after being admitted. Many were locked up for years, even for life, without proper treatment or only receiving rudimentary sedation methods. They lost their freedom and the right to make decisions about their lives and health. Major reforms in mental health care starting from the late 20th century profoundly changed the situation. Patient rights movements, the development of modern psychiatry, and new laws have more tightly protected the rights of people with mental illness. Involuntary hospitalization today requires complex legal procedures, independent medical evaluations, and must be based on clear medical necessity, not social convenience or family wishes. There is a focus on outpatient treatment, community reintegration, and reducing stigma against people with mental illness. Backyard trash burning. This was a very familiar sight in many neighborhoods, especially in rural or suburban areas in the 1950s. An old metal barrel or a small pit in the corner of the backyard where people burned household trash. Instead of systematic waste collection like today, many families simply gathered all household waste, old paper, packaging, food scraps, even plastic and household chemicals, and burned it. The characteristic smell of smoke from burning all sorts of materials often lingered in the evening or early morning air. This was a standard practice in personal waste management in many places. Burning trash at home was considered normal because there was very little understanding at the time about the environmental or health risks from burning synthetic materials, like plastic. People weren't aware that smoke from burning plastic and chemicals could contain toxic substances, causing air pollution and affecting human health and the surrounding environment. Public trash collection systems were not uniformly developed everywhere, especially in areas far from urban centers. Burning trash on site was seen as the easiest and most convenient way to get rid of waste rather than storing it. Today, We know very well that smoke from burning household trash often carries toxic substances. Burning materials like plastic, rubber, or household chemicals creates toxic gases such as dioxins, furans, carbon monoxide, and fine particles causing serious air pollution. Inhaling these substances can cause health problems like respiratory irritation, asthma, and in the long term, can cause nerve damage, endocrine disruption, and increase the risk of cancer. Because of these risks, backyard trash burning is forbidden or strictly regulated in most residential areas today. Communities rely on centralized waste management systems, including regular trash collection, disposal at controlled landfills, or modern incinerators with exhaust filters, and recycling programs to reduce the amount of waste needing disposal. Washing a child's mouth with soap as punishment. For many who grew up in the 1950s and even the 60s, 70s, this is a memorable or forgettable childhood memory. Washing a child's mouth with soap was a common form of punishment in many families when a child swore, lied, or used language considered improper. It was passed down through generations and seen as a strong way to teach children discipline and respect towards adults and language. The burning, bitter, unpleasant feeling of soap in the mouth was considered a direct and unforgettable lesson, making children think carefully before speaking inappropriate words. This was considered normal because it was a widely accepted parenting norm at the time. There weren't many studies on the psychological impact of punishments, and disciplinary methods often tended to rely on physical deterrence or causing discomfort. Parents who did this often believed they were doing what was best for their children, teaching them right from wrong in a way they themselves might have been taught. Today, the concept of parenting has changed significantly based on new understandings of child psychology and positive discipline methods. Washing a child's mouth with soap is gradually being eliminated as parenting standards evolve. The most important reason is that it poses a health risk. Soap, especially older types, could contain chemicals irritating to the mouth lining and digestive tract. If a child accidentally swallowed it, it could cause nausea, vomiting, or other digestive problems. For some, this might be a memory that's both funny, looking back from a different perspective, and bitter for those who experienced it. It shows a major shift in how society views parenting, from focusing on strict discipline to emphasizing safety, understanding, and positive communication. 20 gadgets from the 1970s that were ahead of their time. Remember the 70s? A decade bursting with disco lights, cassette tapes, and bold dreams. But beyond the bell-bottoms and dance floors, it was also a golden age of futuristic tech. Gadgets once thought impossible suddenly became real. In today's video, we're going to explore together 20 of the most iconic gadgets from the 70s that were truly ahead of their time. You might have forgotten some of the items on this list existed, but I believe there will be names and images that make you suddenly exclaim, "Oh, that's right, memories flooding back." Atari Pong. Let's start with an icon of home entertainment. Do you remember this simple game? That small white dot moving on a black screen and two paddles going up and down. It was released in 1972 by Alan Alcorn. Initially, it was just a learning tool created by Alan Alcorn to train his video game design skills for Atari. It simulated the familiar game of table tennis, but in electronic form. On the outside, it was incredibly simple, with extremely basic graphics, just a small square representing the ball and two lines representing the paddles. But hidden beneath that simplicity was an irresistible appeal that made players extremely addicted. The Pong arcade machine quickly became popular in bars and entertainment centers everywhere. But Pong's influence was much greater. It wasn't just a temporary entertainment game. Atari Pong took video games to a whole new level. It was the first commercially successful video game in history. Pong's resounding success kicked off what was called the arcade game boom, opening a new era for the budding game industry. It was even one of the first times electronic games combined with sports, a concept we now call esports. Notably, in 1975, Atari launched a home version called Atari Home Pong. This product revolutionized home entertainment, strongly proving that electronic games could absolutely exist and thrive in the living room space of every family. From that simple white dot and two paddles, an entire billion-dollar entertainment industry was born. Personal computers, microcomputer/Apple II/Commodore PET/TRS-80. Today, everyone has a computer, maybe even several, from laptops, desktops, to tablets. But a few decades ago, the idea of owning an entire computer just for yourself sounded really distant. That was the world of large, bulky computers, only for giant corporations or research institutes, until these machines appeared. That was the birth of the microcomputer, also known as the personal computer. Everything started with pioneering models like the Altair 8800, born in 1975 by MITS. Before that, computers were giant-sized, mainframe, or large, mini-computer, and extremely expensive. The appearance of microprocessors significantly helped shrink computer size and reduce costs. The Altair 8800 was initially mainly sold as a kit and targeted electronics hobbyists. But then, more popular and user-friendly models were born in 1977, a year considered a major milestone. Those were the Apple II, designed by Steve Wozniak, Commodore PET, designed by Chuck Peddle, and TRS-80 from Tandy Radio Shack. These machines were easier to use. Some models, like the Commodore PET, had built-in screens and keyboards. The Apple II and TRS-80 had flexible expandability. The Apple II is especially highlighted as a game-changer for personal computers, thanks to its user-friendly design for the general public. The Commodore PET, on the other hand, pioneered the all-in-one design. The impact of this class of 1977 trio is hard to overstate. They ushered in the personal computer era, truly putting computing power into the hands of everyday users. This not only changed how people worked, but also stimulated the strong development of the software industry, with examples like the BASIC operating system from Microsoft, which was very small back then, or the VisiCalc spreadsheet program. The explosion of new technology companies like Apple Computer is proof of this change. Wikipedia even calls Apple, Commodore, and Tandy the 1977 Trinity, who shaped the early personal computer market. Email. Instant communication is a given these days. We have all kinds of messaging apps. But do you still remember the "you've got mail" sound from AOL? Or even further back, the idea that you could send a message via computer from one place to another, between different computers. This revolutionary idea is email, and it was born very early in 1971. Its inventor was Ray Tomlinson, while working on the ARPANET, the precursor to today's internet. Before Tomlinson's invention, messages could only be sent and received between users logged into the same single large computer mainframe. It was like leaving a sticky note on a colleague's desk, but in the digital space. Ray Tomlinson pondered how a user on computer A could send a message to a user on computer B, two completely different machines. And he found the solution. That solution was simple yet groundbreaking, using the AT symbol. This symbol was used to separate the user's name from the name of the computer that user was using. For example, username @computername. This created a unique address for each user on the network, allowing messages to be routed accurately to the destination computer and recipient. This invention laid the foundation for a revolutionary form of communication. From humble beginnings on the ARPANET, email gradually developed and became a global phenomenon. It was the first major step in connecting people via computer in a personal, fast, and efficient way. Although the way we use email has changed a lot, its basic principle and importance remain intact. cell phone. Remember those legendary brick phones? Durable, long battery life, just for calls. But actually, the concept of a mobile handheld phone appeared very early, with an even brickier version, born right in the 70s. We're talking about the first handheld mobile phone. The first call from such a device was made in 1973 by Martin Cooper of Motorola. Before Cooper and his team, many other large telecom companies tried to develop mobile wireless communication devices for individuals, but struggled or failed. The first prototype Martin Cooper used to make that historic call was extremely bulky, weighing over 1 kilogram, equivalent to about 2.5 pounds. Imagine carrying a brick that heavy to your ear to talk. It wasn't until 1983 that the first commercial mobile phone was launched, the Motorola Dynatac. It was still very heavy, 2.5 pounds, and its price was dizzying. The Dynatac cost about $4,000 in 1983, equivalent to over $23,000 in today's money. It was truly a luxury item. Although crude and expensive in the early stages, this invention had immense significance. It turned the concept of a mobile phone from science fiction into reality. It showed the world that personal wireless communication was completely feasible. This pioneering step paved the way for the great mobile revolution that happened later, leading to the birth of smartphones and the wireless connected world we live in. Which item brings back the most memories for you? Share your story in the comments below. VCR, video cassette recorder. Watching movies at home anytime you want? Recording your favorite TV show to watch later? Sounds normal with today's streaming services, but there was a time when this was a miracle. And it all started with this machine. That was the home video cassette recorder, or VCR. Philips was a pioneer, launching the first home VCR in 1972. This device allowed users to record broadcast content from TV, with recording capability up to 240 minutes, 4 hours. It changed the definition of home entertainment. For the first time, viewers were no longer tied to the broadcasting schedules of TV channels. You could record your favorite movie in the evening to watch on the weekend, or skip annoying commercials. The advent of the VCR also sparked one of the most famous video format wars in tech history, the battle between VHS, from JVC, and Betamax, from Sony. Betamax came out first and had slightly better picture quality. However, VHS ultimately won the market. The reasons were that VHS didn't require high licensing fees, manufacturing costs for tapes and machines were cheaper, and most importantly, recording time on a single tape was longer than Betamax. The VCR revolutionized home entertainment, creating a huge video rental and sales industry, with rental stores becoming familiar places. It truly put content time-shifting power into the hands of users, a very advanced idea at the time. Portable music player, Sony Walkman. Music is a companion. Today, we carry a giant music library in our smartphones. But before iPods or smartphones, the idea of personal music carried anywhere easily and privately seemed like a dream, until this legendary name appeared. That was the Sony Walkman. The first portable music player model, the TPSL2, was launched by Sony in 1979. Before the Walkman, listening to music usually happened at home on a large stereo system, or shared with others via a boom box, which we'll talk about later. There was no way for a person to enjoy their own music privately while on the go. The Walkman changed that. It allowed users to listen to music from cassette tapes anywhere using personal headphones. The initial design of the Walkman was lightweight, small enough to hold in your hand or wear on your body. It quickly became a cultural icon, symbolizing personal freedom and self-expression. You could walk down the street, ride the bus, or sit in the park, immersed in your own world of music. The Walkman became so popular that the name Walkman was sometimes used generically for any portable music player. It laid a solid foundation for the development of all subsequent portable music devices, from CD players, MP3 players, to smartphones. It is one of the most influential consumer inventions of the 70s. Digital watch. For hundreds of years, people told time with hands moving on a dial. Then suddenly, in the 70s, something new appeared, telling time just with glowing numbers on an electronic screen. At first glance, it looked really futuristic, like something out of a science fiction movie. That was the birth and popularization of the digital watch. The first commercial digital watches began appearing in the early 1970s. Hamilton was a pioneer with the Pulsar P1 launched in 1972. Instead of using traditional mechanical movements and hands, digital watches displayed time using numbers on an electronic screen. Initially LED, light-emitting diode, later LCD, liquid crystal display. The initial Pulsar P1 was very expensive, costing up to $2,100, a huge amount of money at the time. With LED watches, you often had to press a button to see the time because continuous display consumed battery. LCD screen technology later emerged and overcame this drawback, allowing continuous time display and much better battery life. Japanese companies like Casio, Seiko, and Citizen quickly adopted this technology. They mass-produced digital watches with many different designs, and most importantly, reduced costs, making digital watches widely accessible to the public. Citizen even pioneered integrating miniature calculators into wristwatches. They provided higher accuracy than mechanical watches, were more convenient for checking time in the dark with a lit screen, and allowed adding many other features like alarms, stopwatches. Do you remember the first time you saw a Pong or a personal computer? Share with us. Digital camera. We live in a world of smartphones with super sharp cameras. The idea of taking pictures without using film rolls is obvious, but before iPhones or compact digital cameras, the idea of taking pictures without film was a real revolution. The first digital camera didn't look like what you see today. The prototype of the first digital camera was invented in 1975 by Steve Sasson at Kodak. Kodak was the giant in the film industry at the time. Sasson's prototype looked bulky like a toaster. It could only capture black and white photos and had extremely low resolution, only 0.01 megapixel, while cheap smartphones today can reach tens or hundreds of megapixels. Images were stored on cassette tape, and the astonishing thing was that it took 23 seconds to capture and save just one picture. Despite creating this invention, Kodak was not enthusiastic about pursuing it, fearing that this new technology would negatively impact their profitable traditional film business. Also in 1975, the first commercial digital camera appeared, the Chromemco Cyclops. It used MOS memory chips as image sensors and had a resolution of 32 by 32 pixels, even lower than Kodak's prototype. The Chromemco Cyclops was a peripheral device requiring connection to a microcomputer to function. Although still very rudimentary and limited, these inventions had historical significance. They paved the way for the era of digital photography, a technology that would later completely change how we capture, store, and share photos. The idea of storing images in digital form was a leap forward, breaking the physical limitations of traditional film photography. Although Kodak missed the opportunity, the legacy of the 1975 invention is still there. Global Positioning System, GPS. Today, we open our phones and know exactly where we are. Map apps guide us everywhere. Going somewhere without a paper map or constantly asking for directions, back then, that was a miracle, something only seen in spy movies. And this technology started right in the 70s. We're talking about the Global Positioning System, or GPS. GPS was not the invention of a single person or company. It was developed by the U.S. Navy initially as a military project. The GPS system, officially launched in 1978, with the launch of the first satellite named Navstar. The development of GPS took place in the context of the space and technology race between the United States and the Soviet Union. It took nearly a decade of testing and building the initial satellite infrastructure before the system became operational. In the early stages, GPS was exclusive U.S. military technology, primarily serving military purposes such as positioning warships, aircraft, and missiles. The ability to accurately determine location on Earth through signals from satellites was a giant leap forward. Although initially for military purposes only, later, GPS signals were allowed for civilian use. This opened up the possibility of accurate global positioning for everyone. This allowance led to the explosion of countless modern positioning applications we use daily, from finding directions for walking or driving to tracking location, managing vehicle fleets. Boombox. Music isn't just for listening alone. Sometimes you want to share it with everyone around you, anywhere. You need something big enough, powerful enough to do that. And so the boombox was born. Boomboxes, also known as portable stereos, became extremely popular in the 1970s and 1980s. These were portable stereo machines, often quite large. They integrated a radio tuner, cassette player, and recorder, along with powerful speakers on the sides. Boomboxes allowed people to take their music into public spaces, parks, beaches, street corners. The boombox quickly became a cultural icon of the 70s to 80s. It is closely associated with the development of street music culture, especially breakdancing and street parties. Boomboxes played an important role in popularizing hip-hop music in its early stages. When DJs and b-boys practiced and performed outdoors, the boombox was their main sound source. It was a form of community, shared entertainment, in contrast to the privacy of the Walkman, although both were portable devices. A large boombox on the shoulder, blasting lively music, is an iconic image of the free-spirited, liberal vibe of that era. Dedicated word processor. Typing documents on a traditional typewriter was a job requiring carefulness. If you made a mistake, correcting it wasn't easy. You had to use correction paper, whiteout, or retype the whole page. Document creation became much easier when this machine appeared. That was the word processor, not software on a computer, but a dedicated device. The first dedicated word processor machines were born in the 1970s. Essentially, they were computers designed to serve only one single purpose: creating and editing text. They usually had an integrated screen and keyboard, along with a processor and memory to store text temporarily or permanently, often using floppy disks or magnetic tape. The biggest and most revolutionary difference compared to typewriters was the ability to easily edit text electronically. You could type incorrectly, then use the backspace or delete key to erase. You could insert words, sentences, cut and paste paragraphs, format margins, align, without having to retype everything. This significantly improved efficiency and productivity in document creation, especially in office environments. Although these machines were expensive and bulky compared to later PCs, they paved the way for the development of modern word processing software like Microsoft Word, Google Docs, on personal computers. Now, I want to hear from you. Are there any other tech gadgets from the 70s that left a deep impression on you that I missed? List them in the comments below so I and everyone else can see. Polaroid SX70 Instant Camera. A great moment just happened. You take a picture, and then you wait. Take the film roll to be developed. Wait a few days, then you can see the pictures. That took so much time. But in the 70s, there was a miracle that allowed you to shoot and see immediately. This camera was launched by Polaroid in 1972. Its most special ability, and also its main attraction, was that it could print photos right after taking them. You just pressed the shutter button. The picture would slide out of the camera, and within a few minutes, the image would slowly appear on special Polaroid photo paper. This was a wonderful combination of convenience and technological innovation at the time. The Polaroid SX70 wasn't just technologically advanced, it also had a unique foldable design, very portable, and looked extremely stylish. The camera became extremely popular and sold millions of units worldwide. Polaroid's instant film was also a distinctive technology of the company. The magic of watching the image gradually appear on the white film created a unique experience. Polaroid also experimented with other instant technologies like Polaroid Polar Vision, 1977, which allowed instant video recording, though it wasn't commercially successful. The Polaroid SX70 brought instant gratification to photography. It was a symbol of innovation in the photography industry and created countless physical, tangible memories immediately. Cuisinart food processor. Cooking is an art, but sometimes it's also time-consuming. Chopping vegetables, mincing meat, mixing dough. Each step requires separate tools and effort. But in the 70s, a kitchen gadget was born, promising to make food preparation much faster, much easier. That was the Cuisinart food processor. This device was developed by Carl Sontheimer and launched in the US in the 1970s. The Cuisinart food processor is essentially a multi-purpose device. It was designed to combine many different food preparation functions into a single machine with interchangeable blades and cutting discs. You could use it to evenly slice vegetables, finely chop onions and garlic, mince meat, grind nuts, knead dough. The initial price of a Cuisinart was around $200 US. Although not cheap, it quickly became popular in both professional restaurants and home kitchens. It represents one of the first applications of automation in cooking, helping people spend less time preparing and more time enjoying meals with family. Texas Instruments Speak and Spell. How do kids learn to spell? Reading books, doing spelling tests. But what if there was a toy that could say the word out loud and check if you spelled it correctly? In the 70s, such a magical learn and play machine was born. This machine was launched in 1978. The special and pioneering point of the Speak and Spell was that it was the first educational device in the world to use speech synthesis technology. Instead of just displaying letters on the screen, this machine could speak. The machine would say a word, and the player's task was to use the built-in keyboard to spell the word back. The machine had a small screen to display the typed word and would give voice feedback on whether you spelled it correctly or incorrectly. Speech synthesis technology at that time was still very new and complex. Integrating it into an affordable consumer device, priced around $50 USD, was a significant achievement. The Speak and Spell changed how children learned to spell and pronounce, turning learning into an engaging, interactive game. This machine sold very well and became a familiar item, associated with the childhood of a generation of children. Portable calculator. Back then, doing complex math wasn't easy. You had to use bulky slide rules or large, slow mechanical calculators. But then, a small machine appeared. It fit neatly in your pocket, and just by pressing a few buttons, it gave you the result. This small machine changed how we learned, worked, and calculated. That was the electronic portable calculator. It began appearing and became popular in the early 1970s. Pioneering companies mainly came from the US, like Sharp, Texas Instruments TI, and HP Hewlett-Packard. Clive Sinclair in the UK also made significant contributions. The birth of the portable calculator was thanks to the development of integrated circuits, IC, and large-scale integration, LSI, chips. These chips allowed the entire logic and calculation circuitry to be shrunk to a very small size. The Mostek MK6010, born in 1970, is considered the first calculator on a chip. The Bizicom LE120A, Handy, 1971, used this chip and is considered the first true pocket calculator in the world. Initially, portable calculators were very expensive, only accessible to engineers and scientists. For example, the HP 35, the first portable scientific calculator, launched in 1972, cost up to $395. However, due to fierce competition and increasingly advanced manufacturing technology, the price of portable calculators dropped sharply very quickly. This led to a heated race between US and Japanese manufacturers. It was truly a gadget with immense impact on daily life. Laser printer. In offices of the past, typewriters were the main tool for creating documents. Making multiple high-quality copies was not simple. Then a new printing technology appeared, faster, quieter, and produced much better prints. That was the laser printer. Laser printing technology was developed in the 1970s. The first high-speed laser printer was the IBM 3800, launched in 1976. Unlike impact printers, which created prints by hitting small pins onto an ink ribbon, laser printers used a laser beam and dry ink, toner, to create images or text on paper. The laser draws the image onto a charged photosensitive drum, then toner adheres to the illuminated areas. And finally, the toner is transferred to paper and fused by heat to stick firmly. The advantages of laser printers over impact printers were very clear. They operated much more quietly, produced sharper prints, especially for text. Laser printers also had the ability to handle various fonts and even more complex graphics. The early IBM 3800 was a giant machine, very fast, could print up to 215 pages per minute, and extremely expensive, priced around $500,000 USD. It was designed for large businesses with high-volume printing needs. However, over time, this technology gradually shrank, became cheaper, and more popular. Cassette tape. Storage for computers. Using ordinary audio cassette tapes to store data for personal computers was a practical and common solution in the late 70s and early 80s. The reason was simple. Floppy disk drives, the more modern storage medium, were very expensive at the time. Often, the price of a floppy disk drive was more expensive than the computer itself. Audio cassette tapes were different. They leveraged cassette recorders that were already available in many households, and cassette tapes themselves were much cheaper than floppy disks. However, storing data on cassette tapes also had major drawbacks. Data read-write speed was extremely slow, only about 300 to 1200 baud. Loading a small program or game from a cassette tape could take many minutes, and loading errors were frequent, requiring you to try again and again. Furthermore, cassette tapes were a sequential access medium, meaning you had to manually fast-forward or rewind the tape to the correct position to find the desired file. You couldn't access randomly like a disk drive. Even the early IBM PC launched in 1981 still came with a cassette interface, simply because IBM was still concerned about the price of disk drives being a barrier for general users. Despite the inconvenience, this medium provided a cheap way to store data, making personal computers accessible to more users. It was an important stepping stone before floppy disk drives became more common and affordable. For many people, the rattling sounds when the computer loaded data from a cassette tape are an unforgettable part of childhood memories associated with early home computers. Bell System picture phone. Communicating by phone was already a great step, but what if you could see the face of the person you're talking to? This idea of video calling, something we do every day via Zoom, Skype, or FaceTime, was actually conceived and even launched a very long time ago, even before the internet became popular. This product was launched by Bell System, AT&T's parent company at the time, in 1970. The picture phone was a video telephone that allowed two users in different locations to see each other's image while having a voice conversation. It was considered a major step towards modern video conferencing. However, this technology in 1970 was still very expensive and limited. The picture phone had extremely expensive usage fees, $160 per month in 1970, equivalent to about $1,100 in today's money. The hardware itself was also bulky and required a special network to operate. Due to the very high price and limited network, the picture phone was a commercial failure. Only about 500 units were sold, mainly to large business customers or extremely wealthy individuals. Although commercially unsuccessful, the picture phone was a pioneering product. It proved the feasibility of transmitting live video images over the telephone network. These initial efforts laid the foundation for video conferencing and video call technology that has become an indispensable communication tool in our lives and work today. If this video brought back many memories, if you enjoyed this trip back in time and want to explore more stories from the past, don't forget to hit like and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next videos. Share this video with your friends from that era. They surely will also have interesting memories and reflections on this topic. Thank you for watching. I hope you had some meaningful moments. See you in the next videos. Have a great day.